On the night of December 31st, anticipation for the upcoming new year filled the air with a sense of excitement. It was an evening meant for celebration, joy, and fresh beginnings. At the City Garden Hotel, nestled in the bustling heart of Manila, a group of friends gathered to bid farewell to an eventful year. Among them was Maya Reyes, a vibrant 23-year-old flight attendant admired for her beauty and spirited personality. To those around her, Maya's life appeared picture-perfect, a promising career, a wide social circle, and an undeniable charm that seemed to draw everyone in. With her long, dark hair cascading down her back and her bright, curious eyes, Maya was no stranger to attention. She was often at the center of things, her magnetic presence hard to ignore. Yet beneath her polished exterior, Maya carried unspoken burdens, the relentless demands of her profession, the constant expectation to appear composed, and the subtle pressures of maintaining her image. These challenges weighed heavily on her, though few noticed. That night, the party felt like a much-needed escape, a temporary respite from the complexities of her routine. The gathering began in a modest hotel room, booked by Maya and three of her closest friends, including Paulo Cruz, a fellow flight attendant known for his lively personality and reliability. Laughter filled the room as they shared stories, clinked glasses, and reveled in the festive atmosphere. The mood was light-hearted, buoyed by music and the promise of a night that could stretch until dawn. Maya seemed to embody the joy of the occasion, dancing freely and living in the moment, as her friends had seen her do many times before. As the clock neared midnight, Paulo suggested inviting more people to keep the energy alive. Riding the wave of the evening's excitement, Maya agreed. Soon, a few new faces appeared at the door, and the intimate group of four expanded into a lively crowd. Among the newcomers were Luis Ramos, a college friend known for her infectious energy at parties, and several others from nearby rooms who had been drawn by the sounds of celebration. The once cozy gathering quickly transformed into a bustling scene of chatter, music, and shared drinks. Though Maya was the only woman in the growing group, she seemed completely at ease, moving effortlessly from one conversation to another. Her laughter lit up the room, creating a warm, convivial atmosphere. It was the kind of scene that could have been lifted from any carefree New Year's Eve, a mix of friends and strangers coming together to toast to new beginnings. As the hours passed, the party began to lose its earlier charm. What started as a simple celebration evolved into a chaotic mix of noise and restless energy. By the early hours of the new year, the mood shifted. Some attendees, including Marco Santos, a man with a reputation for unpredictable behavior and a tendency to drink heavily, had consumed far more alcohol than they could handle. The music blared louder, and the line between innocent fun and reckless abandon started to blur. Maya's laughter, so full of life earlier, now carried hints of fatigue as the long night wore on. Her energy waned, and the carefree joy that had defined the evening gave way to an unsettling unpredictability that no one had anticipated. Around 4 a.m., Paulo noticed that Maya had retreated to a quieter corner of the chaotic room. Her smile lingered, but it seemed distant, almost hollow. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern etched on his face. Maya nodded and waved dismissively, but Paulo couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Glancing toward Louise, who was engrossed in conversation with another group, he leaned in and whispered, "I think we should call it a night." Before they could take any action, another knock came at the door. This time, it was a larger group of men, friends of Marco or people he'd invited, joining the gathering. The room now held 13 men, most of whom Maya barely recognized, if at all. The space once filled with laughter now felt overcrowded and stifling. The noise swelled as drinks were passed around with reckless abandon, and any semblance of control began to slip away. Maya sat quietly on the edge of the bed, her expression distant and her gaze unfocused. Louise, trying to keep the mood light, handed her another drink, but she shook her head. "No more for me," she murmured. Louise shrugged, missing the unease in her tone. The party raged on, without Maya, as she leaned back, her eyes heavy and her mind clouded from the night's indulgence. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, the room was a mess. Half-empty bottles and discarded party favors strewn everywhere. Paolo, who had fallen asleep in a chair, stirred awake to an unsettling quiet. The music and laughter were gone, replaced by a strange, eerie stillness and the faint hum of the city waking up outside. As he scanned the room, his heart sank when he saw Maya still sitting on the bed, completely still. "Maya," he called out, quickly getting to his feet. She didn't respond. Panic surged through him as he approached and gently shook her shoulder. Her skin felt unnaturally cold. Paolo's breath caught, and his eyes widened with fear as he shouted for help, rousing the others from their drunken slumber. The room erupted into chaos. Louise stumbled over, bleary-eyed and disoriented, slurring, "What's going on?" But when his gaze fell on Maya's lifeless body, his face paled, and the gravity of the situation hit him. The vibrant, lively room had transformed into a scene of horror. Shouts of confusion replaced the echoes of celebration as someone fumbled to call emergency services. Yet deep down, they all knew it was already too late. Paramedics arrived swiftly, their expressions grim as they confirmed what Paolo feared. Maya was gone. The weight of the news crushed everyone in the room. Within hours, word spread beyond the hotel, reaching friends, co-workers, and eventually the entire city. Headlines screamed about the mysterious death of a young flight attendant who had been partying with 13 men. Conversations erupted, and public outrage grew. The police soon arrived, cordoning off the scene and beginning their investigation. Room 2209 of the City Garden Hotel, once filled with laughter and music, was now marked with yellow caution tape. Forensic teams photographed the space, gathered evidence, and began interviewing the dazed and shaken partygoers. Detective Inspector Ramon Villanueva, a seasoned investigator known for his precision and relentless pursuit of the truth, was assigned to lead the case. His first task was to answer the most pressing question: what had happened in the hours leading up to Maya Reyes's untimely death? Villanueva stood silently in the dimly lit hotel room, his sharp eyes scanning every detail. The empty bottles scattered across the floor, the crumpled sheets, the faint lipstick smudge on a glass. The atmosphere was thick with unease, a blend of panic and guilt that seemed to cling to the air. Turning to Paulo Cruz, who sat slumped in a chair with his head in his hands, the detective spoke in a measured tone. "You were close to her." Paulo slowly lifted his tear-streaked face and nodded. "Yes, we've been friends for years. She was..." His voice faltered and he swallowed hard. "She was full of life. This doesn't make sense." "Tell me everything you remember from last night," Villanueva pressed, pen poised, his eyes unwavering. Paolo recounted the evening, the small gathering that expanded as more people arrived, Maya's initial joy and energy, her gradual withdrawal to a quieter spot, and the final chaotic hours when everything blurred. As Paolo spoke, Villanueva's mind pieced together the timeline, searching for cracks in the narrative. Meanwhile, in the hallway, Luis Ramos, Marco Santos, and others stood in a tense line, awaiting their turn to speak with the police. Faces that had radiated joy the night before were now etched with fear and apprehension. Their interviews painted a similar picture. Maya had seemed fine early in the evening, mingling and dancing, but her energy waned as the hours dragged on. No one admitted to witnessing anything suspicious, or at least nothing they were willing to disclose. Inside the room, the forensic team worked methodically, collecting evidence and documenting every detail. Initial findings noted bruises on Maya's arms and legs and minor abrasions that didn't align with a typical party scenario. Speculation began to swirl. Hotel staff whispered rumors, and within hours, social media was ablaze with theories. Some accused the men at the party of foul play, while others suggested substance abuse or an overdose as the cause. At the police station, Villanueva studied the preliminary autopsy report. It revealed that Maya had died from a ruptured aorta, a sudden catastrophic medical event. But the report raised further questions, highlighting unexplained bruises and marks on her body. Could these injuries be explained by the medical condition, or did they point to something darker? News of Maya's death ignited public outrage. Her story became a rallying cry, sparking conversations about women's safety, party culture, and trust. Social media flooded with images of Maya's vibrant smile, posts laced with grief and anger, and hashtags demanding justice for Maya. The men at the party, particularly Luis and Marco, quickly found themselves under public scrutiny. Luis, known for his outgoing nature, bristled under the weight of suspicion. During his second interview with Villanueva, his hands fidgeted nervously as he insisted, "We didn't do anything. She was our friend. We'd never hurt her." Villanueva's gaze remained steady. "How do you explain the marks on her body?" "I don't know," Luis stammered, shifting uncomfortably. The room was crowded, people bumped into each other, and everyone was drunk. "But I swear, no one would have hurt Maya." The detective tapped his pen against his notebook. "You were the last one to hand her a drink," he said, his voice calm but probing. "Was there anything in it?" "No," Luis replied too quickly. "Just champagne." Villanueva jotted down the response, his face unreadable. He knew better than to take any statement at face value. As the days turned into weeks, the case grew more complex. Toxicology reports confirmed the presence of alcohol in Maya's system, but no drugs, a finding that only fueled more speculation. How could her death be explained without substances? And what about the bruises? The media latched onto every detail, often sensationalizing the story. Headlines blared, "Mysterious death of flight attendant at New Year's party," and 13 men, one tragic night. Public opinion skewered the men at the party, particularly Luis and Marco, as their lives were picked apart by strangers armed with fragments of the truth. Amidst the chaos, Maya's grieving family stayed largely in the background, mourning privately while grappling with the same unanswered questions and frustration that consumed the public. Maya's mother, Elena Reyes, spoke in a tearful interview, her voice trembling with grief. "My daughter was loved by so many. I just don't understand how this could happen. All we want are answers." Her plea intensified the pressure on Detective Inspector Ramon Villanueva and his team. Determined to uncover the truth, they retraced their steps, re-interviewed partygoers, and meticulously reviewed footage from the hotel's surveillance cameras. The surveillance videos painted a fragmented picture of the night. Maya was seen laughing, holding a drink, and mingling with the crowd. As the party wore on, Her demeanor shifted. Her movements slowed. Her energy visibly waned. The last clear clip showed her sitting on the edge of the bed, staring off blankly as the chaos continued around her. However, the most critical moments, the ones when the room's noise and activity could have masked distress, remained elusive. Villanueva's frustration mounted as each promising lead circled back to the same frustrating dead ends. The evidence presented troubling details, bruises, inconsistencies, but no definitive perpetrator. The men accused of wrongdoing clung to their claims of innocence. Marco Santos, known for his brash personality but not for violence, insisted during his third interview, "I know how this looks, but I swear it was just a party. None of us thought it would end like this." The detective's mind wrestled with the unanswered questions. The bruises, the timing of Maya's sudden collapse, and the lack of clear evidence left him unsettled. Was this truly a tragic accident, or was there a hidden detail everyone had missed? As weeks turned into months, the investigation continued to captivate the city. Villanueva and his team scrutinized every shred of evidence, but the truth remained elusive. Public outrage only grew louder, and wild theories circulated. Speculation ranged from bizarre rituals to secret motives among the attendees, each rumor adding another layer of complexity to the case. Late one night, Villanueva sat alone in his dimly lit office, sifting through the case files yet again. Photographs from the crime scene, toxicology reports, and the coroner's notes were spread before him like scattered puzzle pieces. The bruises on Maya's body gnawed at him. They hinted at a struggle, yet no one at the party admitted to witnessing anything unusual. Every avenue of inquiry seemed to lead back to the same individuals and the same inconclusive evidence. The forensic report offered some clarity, but left troubling questions unanswered. It concluded that Maya's death was caused by a ruptured aorta, likely exacerbated by alcohol and underlying high blood pressure, a rare but plausible event. Still, the report didn't explain the bruises or the discrepancies in the attendees' statements. Determined to leave no stone unturned, Villanueva decided to dig deeper into the backgrounds of the partygoers, particularly Luis Ramos and Marco Santos. Luis, a longtime friend of Maya, had a spotless record and was known for his sociable nature. Marco, however, presented a more complicated profile. His history included incidents of reckless behavior and a quick temper, though none had escalated to violence. Sensing a possible lead, Villanueva summoned Marco for another round of questioning, this time at the station. Marco arrived looking haggard, his posture defensive. Exhaustion and irritation were etched into his face. "Detective, I've told you everything I know," he said, his voice carrying a note of exasperation as he sat across from Villanueva. The detective leaned forward, his expression calm but probing. "Humor me, Marco. Let's go over it again," he said, his fingers steepled. "Tell me about the last time you saw Maya that night." Marco sighed heavily, running a hand through his unkempt hair. "Fine," he muttered, resignation creeping into his tone. It was early, around 4:30 a.m., and the room was in disarray, with people scattered everywhere. Marco recalled, "I saw her on the bed. She looked tired. Louise was sitting next to her, but everything seemed normal at the time." Detective Villanueva pressed further. "Did you notice anyone behaving strangely or anything unusual happening?" Marco's gaze flickered in thought before he shook his head. "Number of people were drunk, sure, but no one was violent. We were just partying." Villanueva observed Marco closely, searching for any hint of dishonesty. There was no obvious deceit, but a persistent feeling nagged at the detective that something critical was being overlooked. Dismissing Marco with instructions to stay available, Villanueva returned to his notes. Meanwhile, Paulo Cruz, Maya's closest friend, wrestled with guilt. He replayed the events of that night in his mind repeatedly, desperate to uncover anything he might have missed. The whispers and judgmental stares he encountered in public only deepened his self-doubt. One afternoon, Paulo received a cryptic message from an unknown number. "You don't know the full story. Meet me at Café Solaris at 7 p.m. I can help." Paulo's heart pounded. The message was enigmatic, but he felt compelled to investigate. That evening, he arrived at the cafe, scanning the room nervously. A young woman with sharp eyes and a serious demeanor waved him over. "I'm Elena," she introduced herself quietly. "I was staying in the room next door. I overheard things you should know." Paulo leaned closer, his throat tightening. "What did you hear?" he asked. Lowering her voice, Elena described muffled sounds and loud conversations filtering through the thin hotel walls. "Around 5 a.m., I heard someone yell something like, 'Calm down.' Then it went silent. At the time, I thought it was just drunken noise, but now I'm not so sure." Paulo's mind raced. This was the first mention of a possible altercation. Why hadn't this surfaced earlier? Thanking Elena, he hurried to inform Detective Villanueva. The new information sparked fresh determination in Villanueva. He requested guest records for the surrounding hotel rooms and set up interviews with anyone who might have witnessed the early morning events. Hotel staff confirmed seeing unfamiliar faces entering and leaving nearby rooms, suggesting the party had drawn attendees from other areas. A breakthrough came when additional surveillance footage revealed a man entering room 2209 at 4:45 a.m. His face was partially obscured, and he wasn't identified as part of the main group. Villanueva's team tracked him down. It was Carlos Medina, a friend of Marco's who hadn't been listed among the primary attendees. When brought in for questioning, Carlos appeared anxious, avoiding eye contact. "It was just a party," he said, his voice shaky. "I showed up late and didn't stay long. I left before anything bad happened." "Why didn't you come forward earlier?" Villanueva pressed, his tone firm. Carlos hesitated, muttering, "I didn't think it mattered. I was drunk and didn't remember much." Villanueva noted Carlos's discomfort. His nervousness hinted at more than fear of judgment. It suggested something was being concealed. The detective leaned in, sensing he was close to the truth. "We have a witness who heard raised voices," Villanueva stated. "Who was arguing with Maya?" Carlos visibly paled, his hands trembling. "It wasn't exactly an argument," he admitted. "Marco and Louise were talking, but there was tension. Maya got up to leave, and Marco reached for her arm. It wasn't rough, but she pulled back and fell. I don't think he meant to hurt her. It all happened so fast." Villanueva paused, pen hovering over his notepad. The pieces began falling into place. The bruises on Maya's arms, her fall, and the sudden rupture. It seemed less like a deliberate act of harm and more like a tragic accident in a heated moment. As the evidence aligned, the outline of what had happened began to take shape. The tragedy wasn't born of malice, but of reckless decisions that spiraled out of control in the chaos of that night. Detective Villanueva worked to construct a clear narrative that would finally answer the pressing question: what truly happened to Maya Reyes? His mind raced as he pieced together the details that had eluded him for so long. The bruises, the sudden rupture, and the fleeting moments captured on surveillance footage all pointed to a tragic sequence of events, unplanned but devastating. Yet, one critical step remained: confronting Marco Santos and Luis Ramos with the new evidence. "Marco, I need you to come in," Villanueva said over the phone, his tone firm but neutral. "We've uncovered new evidence, and I believe it's time you told us everything." Marco arrived an hour later, visibly nervous. Luis was already seated in the interrogation room, his eyes darting anxiously, exhaustion and fear evident in his expression. From behind the glass, Villanueva paused, gathering himself before entering. This was the moment to bring clarity, not only for the case, but for Maya's grieving family and the public clamoring for answers. Sitting across from the pair, Villanueva began, "Marco, Luis, we spoke to Carlos. We know there was tension, and we know Maya tried to leave. This is your chance to explain what happened." Luis stared down at his trembling hands, his voice barely audible. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," he whispered, tears pooling in his eyes. "We were just having fun drinking, talking, but then Marco and I started arguing about something stupid." Marco shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Luis, his jaw tightening. "Maya got up to leave, probably tired of the noise. I reached out to pull her back for a second. I didn't grab her hard. I swear, I didn't mean to hurt her. But she lost her balance, stumbled, and hit the edge of the bed frame. She sat back down after that." Villanueva leaned forward, scrutinizing Marco's words. "And then?" Luis took a shaky breath. "She didn't say much. She just looked tired, like she needed to rest. We thought she was okay, just drunk and exhausted. We didn't realize it was serious." The room fell silent as the weight of their statements settled. Villanueva analyzed their account carefully. The bruises on Maya's arms matched Marco's description of the brief, unintentional grab. The marks on her side aligned with a fall against a hard surface. It fit the pathologist's findings of a fatal rupture exacerbated by the impact. Villanueva exhaled slowly. This wasn't a case of malice, but of carelessness and tragic misjudgment. Maya's death was accidental preventable, yes, but not intentional. It was the result of alcohol, fatigue, and the chaos of that fateful night. Later, as Villanueva debriefed his team, the mood was heavy. They had the truth, but it brought no comfort. The public would demand clarity, and Maya's family deserved as much closure as possible. At a press conference, Villanueva addressed the media. "The investigation into the death of Maya Reyes has concluded. Evidence indicates her passing was the result of an unfortunate accident during a chaotic New Year's Eve party. We found no evidence of deliberate harm or foul play. This tragedy serves as a stark reminder of how fragile life can be and the irreversible consequences of impulsive actions." The public's reaction was mixed. Many mourned Maya more deeply, recognizing her death as a preventable accident, underscoring the dangers of alcohol and late-night revelry. Others remained skeptical, clinging to conspiracy theories or questioning the thoroughness of the investigation. Maya's mother, Elena Reyes, appeared on television, her eyes red, but her voice resolute. "I miss my daughter every single day. Nothing can bring her back, but at least now we know what happened. I hope her story serves as a reminder to look out for one another and be mindful of how small actions can have profound consequences." The city moved forward, though not without carrying the lessons of Maya's tragedy. Friends checked on each other more often, and caution lingered when parties stretched into the early hours. Maya became a symbol of joy cut short, a name etched in people's minds as they reflected on how fleeting decisions could lead to permanent loss. Do you believe justice was served in Maya's case, or are there aspects that deserved further investigation? What lessons do you take from this heartbreaking story? Share your thoughts and join the conversation. Your insights could inspire others to reflect on how our choices affect those around us.